I'm sorry, are you actually proposing we gamble our Q3 forecast on a hallucination engine? That was the line, the exact sentence that's been seared into my memory like a laser burn. It came seconds after I wrapped up a 20-minute pitch. Crisp, data-backed, real-world benchmarks, and a clean set of mock dashboards. I wasn't just pitching an idea. I was offering a revolution. An AI-powered forecasting tool I had quietly developed in the margins of my job, between product reviews, planning calls, and the long silences after circle-back promises. This was my baby. Lean, modular, accurate. A bullet to the temple of the clunky spreadsheet labyrinth our analytics team spent half their life inside. But that sentence came from Darren Whitmore, Director of Strategy, Harvard grad, legacy hire, and proud owner of the world's most expensive empty suit. He dropped that line with a nasal laugh, then looked around the conference table with that signature smirk, the one that always said, "I'm not threatened, I'm amused." "Thanks for the ambition," he added, voice dripping with smugness. "But we don't stake money on fantasy novels." Fantasy. He said it like I'd suggested starting a unicorn farm in Montana. Around the room, the air changed. That kind of silence, sharp, suffocating, the one that crawls into your collar and makes your skin burn. Someone coughed. Nicole from HR shuffled her papers like she could disappear into the agenda. Across the table, Aaron, our junior data guy with too much talent and too little spine, flashed me a half-second glance of sympathy before locking eyes with the stale muffins by the coffee machine. The humiliation didn't hit all at once. It seeped in like ink, slow and heavy. By the time Darren pivoted back to the approved pipeline strategy, I was staring at the whiteboard, already calculating how many hours I could steal back from my evenings and weekends. I didn't argue, didn't plead. I nodded, packed my notes, not the printed deck, I'd memorized every frame, and left the paper copy on the table like a corpse for the janitor. I walked out of that room, hit the elevator button, and for the first time in months, smiled. If Darren wanted to call it fantasy, fine. I'd build it anyway. Build it until it was too big to ignore, until he had no choice but to choke on his own denial. That night, I pulled out napkin sketches from old Zoom calls. Flowcharts, logic engine notes, rough UI panels I'd mocked up with free online tools. I poured myself a drink, cracked open my battle-worn personal laptop, and opened a new folder. Not a fantasy, AI, V1. 3 hours vanished. I mapped out the first few data pipelines, pulled in public demand signals from retail and logistics APIs, sketched a basic neural model. It was rough, unoptimized, but it was real. Mine, built from scratch. Meanwhile, back at the company, finance was in beta with a $2 million forecasting platform from a consultancy that required 3 weeks of onboarding and a blood pact just to update a variable. I wore a new mask at work. Burnout. Easiest disguise in the corporate circus. No one questioned my fatigue. No one questioned why I wasn't volunteering for new projects. No one, except Aaron. He cornered me in the stairwell one day. "That model you pitched," he muttered. "I ran your numbers, quietly, off the record. It actually made a lot of sense." I raised an eyebrow. If you ever wanted someone to, I don't know, stress test it or whatever, off the clock. That was the moment. The seed took root, not just in me, but in someone else. Darren thought he killed my idea in that boardroom. He didn't. He gave it teeth. There's something almost holy about typing code at 2 a.m. under a flickering kitchen light while the rest of the world sleeps off their corporate-induced burnout. That's how it started. Not in a glossy incubator or a glass tower with venture capital lattes, but in my cramped apartment, hunched over a secondhand laptop, the whir of its overheating fan keeping tempo with my caffeine-fueled heartbeat. Each night, After enduring another soulless round of performance check-ins and roadmap alignment sessions, I'd light a candle, microwave leftover curry, and dive back into the real work. Python scripts, TensorFlow pipelines, retail datasets scraped from public APIs, forecasting models cobbled together with spit, duct tape, and raw obsession. Nothing touched my work laptop. Not a single line of code, not a flicker of a file name. I knew better. The company's IT department was paranoid, nosy, and above all, loyal to Darren. One slip, a misrouted email, a stray file in the wrong cloud folder, and I'd be branded a data security risk, which, in corporate speak, is just a fancy way of saying, you're fired and we're keeping your pension. So I got smart. Burner email, new Notion account, registered a discount domain using a sketchy coupon site, even bought a new keyboard when mine started sticking on the spacebar. Everything documented, anonymized, sanitized. And I tracked every cent. $19 for a cloud server host, $12.99 for the replacement keyboard, $32 for a night of Thai takeout because apparently sleep is optional, but coconut curry is non-negotiable when debugging recursive loops at 3 a.m. My savings took hits, sure, but for the first time in years, my soul felt like it could breathe again. Not performative productivity, not LinkedIn badge productive. I was actually building something. The system began to take shape, a forecasting tool that didn't just regurgitate past patterns, one that could learn, adapt, understand context and nuance, not some half-baked AI that spat out buzzwords. This was something alive, something useful. Meanwhile, back at the office, the $2 million solution Darren championed was wheezing its way through a tragic beta test. It had already missed its first internal deadline. The dashboard lagged 6 hours behind actual data. Analysts were quietly panicking, manually backfilling gaps that the consultants forgot to account for. You could practically hear the disappointment echo through the Slack channels. Once, in a demo meeting, a consultant proudly explained how their system could forecast demand spikes based on lunar phases. I kid you not, I wrote in my notes, full moon equals surge in adult diaper sales. No one laughed, not even a chuckle. Darren nodded solemnly and muttered, "Now that's innovation." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled, because while they were busy betting on astrology and buzzwords, I had a prototype quietly running on a discount VPS, and it worked. It wasn't pretty, not yet, but it was fast. It could process real-time inventory snapshots, map them against public sentiment trends, and adjust predictions within minutes. One night, for fun, I fed it 3 weeks of Etsy seller data. The tool flagged a micro-trend, a sudden rise in custom pet-earn purchases. Grim? Yes. Accurate? Terrifyingly. At work, I started declining new assignments. I let the burnout narrative carry me like a shield. Just a little mentally fried, I'd say in meetings, camera off, voice low, sipping burnt coffee while writing bug fixes for my real project on a second screen. No one pushed. Burnout's the one thing corporate never questions, because fixing it means they'd have to change. Aaron became my silent ally. We never discussed it in detail, but when I mentioned I needed help with testing SKU cluster filters, he just nodded and showed up with a cleaned dataset like it was the most natural thing in the world. We weren't loud. We weren't rebellious in the fire and fury way. But we were building teeth. The first time someone used my tool without knowing my name, I nearly cried. It was still barely a prototype. A mess of open-source plugins, hastily written Flask routes, and a UI that looked like it had been designed by a bored intern in 2012. But it worked. It worked well enough to help someone, and that changed everything. I branded it Forecastive. The name came to me while staring at a blinking cursor on a blank screen. One too many glasses of bourbon in. No bio, no founder story, no smiling stock photo. Just a tagline I typed and retyped 12 times. Smarter forecasting. No crystal ball required. I set up a basic landing page using a free Bootstrap template, hooked it to the MVP through a janky webhook system, and launched in the most anonymous way possible. A quiet post on a subthread of our saws. Built a small forecasting tool for indie shops, AMA. No links to my personal identity, no clues back to my employer, just screenshots, sanitized graphs, sanitized language. That same night, someone signed up. An indie bookstore in Vermont uploaded 6 months of sales data, asking if the tool could predict holiday inventory needs for niche horror titles. I ran the numbers through Forecastive, then sat back and waited. 2 hours later, the reply hit my burner inbox. Holy saw! This is better than what we pay Shopify Premium for. I reread that email 11 times. Then I paced. I laughed. I panicked. I cried a little, all at once. Because nobody tells you what it feels like when your rogue idea actually works. It's not pride. It's fear. Like holding a lit firecracker and not knowing when it'll blow. Within days, more users trickled in. A boutique fashion shop in Oregon. A guy who owned 4 gas stations in Nevada and wanted to stop overstocking hot Cheetos on weekends. That one made me laugh, until the system cross-referenced sales spikes with high school football game nights and suggested a SKU reallocation plan tied to kickoff times. His reply? I don't know who you are, but I think I love you. I was riding a seesaw of emotions, grinning in my kitchen one minute, panic-checking my burner inbox the next. Every time someone used the tool, I imagined corporate lawyers busting down my door screaming about NDAs and IP theft. But no one came. Only more users did. They started asking for features, confidence sliders, filters, dashboards. I worked until 3 a.m. most nights, patching bugs and shipping updates on servers that sounded like they were powered by hamsters. A weird little community began to form in the forum I bolted onto the site, powered by a dusty plugin that hadn't seen an update since 2018. Users swapped hacks, left feedback, even asked each other for tips. And the data? It didn't lie. They weren't just being nice. They actually liked this thing. At the office, things were unraveling fast. Darren's million-dollar darling was flailing. It completely missed Q3E trends. The model failed to account for international shipping delays tied to port slowdowns in Asia. Mine did. Just for fun, I'd coded a Reddit sentiment scraper that flagged logistics disruptions 3 days before mainstream news picked them up. That's how the hot Cheetos guy saw it. But back at work? Chaos. Emergency variance meetings. Consultants scribbling on whiteboards like modern prophets. Executives tossing around phrases like pivoting strategy and model reconciliation. I sipped bad coffee and watched them drown. For the first time, I realized I was invisible, not fired, not missed, just gone. And that was freedom. I leaned into it. Conservation mode. Minimal input, minimal risk. While Darren paced meeting rooms, trying to plug holes in a $2 million disaster, I was behind my second screen watching Forecastive onboard new users and hit our first 900 in monthly recurring revenue. From zero, with no budget, just code and caffeine. It was a Tuesday morning when the Trade Journal article dropped. I was sipping my usual sludge-colored office coffee, half listening to a passive-aggressive update about Q4 KPIs, when someone in the strategy Slack dropped a link. A dark horse in forecasting, the AI tool indie retailers swear by. No founder name, no company backstory, just a sleek screenshot of the Forecastive dashboard and a glowing review lifted from a small business LinkedIn post. Shockingly intuitive, a credible threat to bloated legacy platforms. I stopped breathing halfway through the second paragraph. Within hours, my burner inbox lit up like a Christmas tree. Curious clients, niche brands, and one message that made my fingers lock around the mouse. Hi, Forecastive team. We're evaluating early-stage tools for integration. Could we schedule a short demo? The sender? NovaCrest Analytics, our biggest competitor. Bigger team, bigger reach. Aggressively funded. The same firm that had poached two of our directors last year. And the one Darren used to mock as our overhyped little cousins. I checked the email headers 3 times. It was real. Legit domain. Real IP. My stomach turned inside out. This wasn't Reddit nerds or Etsy shop owners anymore. This was Predator country. And I was still hiding behind a fake domain and a duct-taped backend. I bought a $47 voice modulator, ran 3 practice calls through it, tweaked my speech to lower pitch and flatter cadence, routed a Calendly link through a spoof alias. Founder name, Clara Vey. No video, no logo, just audio and screen share. The call came on a Thursday. 3 NovaCrest reps. Polite, tense, transactional. The first guy? Technical sniper. What kind of recursive learning strategy are you using to manage delayed variable drift? I smiled into my mic. We use weighted dropout smoothing over Bayesian flux. Keeps margin of error under 4% across cross-temporal nodes. Technically true. Also technically something I invented at 1 a.m. while stress-eating jelly beans and debugging convolution stacks. The second guy was the closer. We'd like to explore exclusive licensing, low 7 figures, immediate terms. The tone wasn't generous. It was predatory. Take this, or we'll crush you. I told them we were focused on broad accessibility and community-driven development. Translation, screw off. The call ended in silence. Then one said, "Fair enough. You'll hear from us again." I closed the call and vomited into the recycling bin under my desk. No dignity, pure nerves, but no regrets. Because the very next day, I started hearing whispers. Have you seen this Forecastive thing? It's pulling some of our smaller clients. One of the VPs mentioned it in a team huddle, half curious, half worried. Darren didn't say a word, but I saw his jaw tighten, his fingers twitch. He'd seen that dashboard before, back when it was just a mocked-up slide in my pitch deck. The one he called fantasy. The one he laughed at. And now it had teeth. The email came at 2:13 a.m. Pacific Time. Subject line, acquisition proposal, confidential, urgent response requested. From NovaCrest Senior Partner. The same one from the demo call. The one who thought I'd fold for pocket change. But this wasn't scraps. It was a high 8-figure offer. Full buyout, clean equity conversion, optional public announcement, earn-out clause spanning 3 years. Tucked in legalese. Prepared to move quickly. Offer expires in 96 hours. I froze, stared at the screen, watched the cursor blink like a heartbeat. 8 figures. Once that number only existed in dreams. Now it was just sitting there, cold, calculated, real. I whispered, "What the 5 times like a prayer. Then I did the only rational thing a paranoid solo founder could do at 2:30 a.m. I emailed my lawyer. Subject line, "We need to talk, now." My startup attorney, Ben Rosen, ex-VC, part-time tech whisperer, full-time night owl, called me back in under 10 minutes. He sounded groggy, but as soon as he saw the forwarded offer, he went wide awake. "Holy hell," he muttered. "You realize this would make you—" "I know," I said. My voice cracked a little. "But I need it airtight. NDA proof. No clause." We spent the next 48 hours dissecting every clause like it was a bomb about to go off. We trimmed the earn-out period, cleaned up the equity structure, secured a side letter that guaranteed post-acquisition jobs for my 2 part-time developers, including the self-taught prodigy in Montana who once told me my code was shockingly clean for someone fueled by pad thai and vengeance. When the final dotted lines were signed and the funds hit escrow, the PR team at NovaCrest sent me a draft for the press release. I added one line: Founder, Olivia Tran, my name, not Clara Vey, not any of the aliases I'd hidden behind for months, mine, because the hiding was over. The press release went live at 10:02 a.m. Monday. By 10:06, I had 3 voicemails from senior leadership, 14 Slack messages marked urgent, a calendar invite, emergency board meeting, 11 o'clock a.m. Technically, I was still an employee for 4 more days. When I walked into that boardroom, every eye turned. Darren was already there, sweating through his lavender button-down like a man who hadn't slept since Friday. His collar hung open. His mouth twitched. The CEO didn't even look at me. He flipped through a printed copy of the press release, then looked across the table at Darren. "You said no to this?" Darren opened his mouth. Nothing came out, just air and panic. The CEO didn't let him stammer. "Don't." Just one word, a blade across the neck of Darren's career. I didn't sit. I didn't need to. I said, calm as a windless morning, "I have 4 days left on payroll. Let me know how you'd like to use them." Then I walked out. Not to my desk, not to the cubicle I once lived in, but to the elevator, to the waiting black car, to my next life. The life Darren said was fantasy. The next time I stepped into that boardroom, it wasn't as an employee, it wasn't even as a guest. It was as the founder of Forecastive, now a wholly owned subsidiary of NovaCrest Analytics, valued just shy of 9 figures, with my name in bold on the acquisition paperwork. The room looked smaller somehow, or maybe colder, sterile. Like all the fake plants and marketing slogans couldn't hide the fact that the real power had shifted. Darren was already seated, tie askew, eyes twitching. He looked like a man mid-free fall. He opened his mouth, probably to grovel or redirect or salvage his ego. The CEO didn't even let him inhale. "Don't," he said again, sharp, final. Everyone turned to me. I stood, no pitch deck, no blazer, just me in the same black turtleneck I wore the night I first coded Forecastive in a greasy diner booth. The CEO shut the folder with a crisp slap. "How many other fantasies did we reject?" he asked aloud. No one answered. I smiled. Not the smug kind. The kind you wear when you finally breathe fresh air after drowning quietly for years. I took one last look around the boardroom. The stale coffee sweating in forgotten cups, the faded motivational posters, the silent desperation clinging to the air like dust. Then I said, softly but clearly, "Thank you for the severance. It kept the servers running the first few months." A few chuckles broke out. Nervous, mostly. I caught Aaron's eyes across the room, the junior analyst who'd once quietly believed in me. He gave the smallest nod. Pride? Shock? Maybe both. Then I turned and walked out. Down the hallway, I used to tread in silence. Out of the building, I used to dream of escaping. Into a black car, already waiting, engine humming like it knew. Across town, a glass front office with Forecastive's logo now gleamed under the morning sun. Inside, my team, lean, brilliant, caffeinated, was already running our Monday stand-up. Whiteboards filled, roadmaps updated, a new batch of beta clients waiting to onboard. We had features to push, bugs to squash, a rollout going live in Australia by next week. Darren? He never came up again. Maybe he got reassigned. Maybe he rage quit. Maybe he's still floating in corporate limbo, buried in buzzwords and KPIs that don't love him back. Me? I was never invisible again. The strange thing about revenge, real, career-defining revenge, is that it doesn't roar. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or confetti. It whispers. It settles deep in your bones, quiet and complete. But this story didn't end there. Because Forecastive wasn't just an act of rebellion, it became a movement. Small businesses that had been priced out of enterprise forecasting tools now had something that made sense. Fast, intuitive, no hand-holding required. I started getting messages from all over. A pet supply chain in Oregon. We finally understand our inventory for the first time in 3 years. A tiny wholesaler in Belgium. We're predicting better than the software we paid $20K a year for. A logistics startup in Texas. You saved us from hiring 2 data consultants. Each note lit a fuse inside me. Not just pride. Purpose. And when one solo founder DM'd me to say, Forecastive is the only SaaS product I've ever loved, I had to walk away from my desk and cry. The growth was rapid. Too rapid, if I'm honest. My inbox turned into a war zone of bug reports, integration requests, and curious investors sniffing around. I brought on more help. Another developer from the AMA thread, a product manager I trusted, a part-time designer who moonlighted at a gaming studio. We rebuilt the UI, launched a Shopify plugin, added Stripe integration. Forecastive went from being a duct-taped miracle to a real product. Scalable, sleek, and stable. Meanwhile, Novacrest kept their distance, which surprised me. Their offer was real and clean. No golden handcuffs, no branding overhauls, just one clause. Let it grow. They stuck to it. Why? Because they weren't buying tech. They were buying traction. And I had built it in spite of everything. In spite of Darren. In spite of the laughter. In spite of every meeting where my ideas were dismissed by people who'd never opened a line of code in their lives. Forecastive started appearing in side-by-side comparisons with legacy systems. And winning. Trade blogs picked it up. Founders recommended it in private discords. Analysts started referencing our forecasts on LinkedIn. And me? I showed up. Podcast interviews, AMA panels, startup awards. The black turtleneck became my armor. Not because it was stylish, but because it reminded me where it started. A diner booth, a late night, a greasy keyboard, and a dream no one believed in. A few months later, I found myself back in that same diner booth where it all began. The seat was still ripped. The light above still flickered like it couldn't decide whether to give up or try harder. I opened my laptop. Not the ancient wheezing one. That thing had earned a quiet death. No, this was new. Sleek. Fast. Paid for in full with clean money from a company I built with bare hands and burning hours. I wasn't coding tonight. I was writing a letter. To myself. To who I was that night after Darren laughed in my face. The version of me who packed up her dignity and walked out of the boardroom in silence. The woman who smiled, not in defeat, but in defiance. Because here's what she didn't know yet. That the nights would be long and the fear would be constant. That paranoia would become a skill set. That burnout would become a disguise so perfect it bought her time to build. She didn't know that her idea, the fantasy, would go on to power over 2,000 small businesses across 3 continents. She didn't know she'd turned down exclusivity offers from firms who once mocked her work. She didn't know she'd build a tool so accurate it would predict port delays before government reports, help a coffee chain prevent 6 figures of waste, and save a stationary wholesaler from bankruptcy during peak wedding season. She didn't know that one day she'd be invited to give a keynote at the same data conference Darren once bragged about attending. She didn't know that after that keynote, a quiet man in a too-tight suit would approach her, resume in hand, asking if Forecastive was hiring. His name? Aaron, the analyst who had once hesitated, once faltered, but also once believed. I hired him on the spot, because I remembered what it felt like to have your talent buried under someone's ego, and I swore no one would feel that way on my team. We grew slow, but solid. Forecastive became a name people trusted. We didn't promise magic. We promised clarity. And we delivered. Eventually, I did get a call from someone at my old company. Not Darren. He had vanished into the gray sludge of LinkedIn updates, maybe exploring new opportunities, maybe just forgotten. He was never mentioned again. Corporate entropy, as expected. The call was from the CEO. He congratulated me, voice flat, like the words tasted bitter. Then he asked if I'd consider consulting for a new product line they were spinning up. I let him finish. Then I asked one question. How many other fantasies have you laughed out of the room? He didn't answer. I didn't need him to. We ended the call politely. I hung up, exhaled, and smiled to myself. Because I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need revenge. I had something better. Proof. Proof that I wasn't delusional. Proof that betting on myself wasn't madness. Proof that the sharpest ideas don't need permission to exist. They need space, and stubbornness, and a little bit of rage. The story of Forecastive didn't start in a boardroom. It started in silence, in rejection, in a smirk. And it ended, not with applause, but with impact. So if you're sitting in the back of a meeting right now, biting your tongue while someone else calls your idea a fantasy, I'll leave you with this. You don't have to fight them. You just have to outbuild them. And when the time comes, don't roar. Ship.